All right. So this this was the front end of our homepage, which we started designing the footer. So this is just the skeletal structure of the footer. Now, what we'll try and complete is just to style it, to make it look user-friendly. And at the same time, our plan is also make the footer section responsive. So let's quickly delve into that. So this is the index page. So like I told us, I think we have an existing CSS file already. Let's see if we can just add it, or we create a separate CSS file just to take care of the footer. So what will happen is that I'll maintain the same CSS file that I use in styling the navigation bar, which is this very one here. So I'll visit that file. I think that should be index.css. And then use comment to demarcate the section. So here, styling the footer. Styling the footer. Okay, so like I advised us that anytime you want to style your HTML structure, there is need for you to understand the selectors. The selectors are what you are going to use to reference any of the elements in your CSS, because we are using the standard CSS styling now, or addition. So which means that your CSS file and your HTML file are not in one page. So for that reason, you must establish connection, and you must always tell CSS how you are relating to the element in HTML file. So now let me study the structure of my HTML. It's very important. Anytime you want to start styling your HTML content, you observe this. So observing the section, we have for what I have here, if I were to model this structure, we have the first container. We have the first container, which is class footer. So I've already know that, okay, there's going to be a selector called dot footer. Then there is another container wrapped inside the first container, whose class name is footer under hyphen container. There is another container which is footer hyphen section. And then of course we have all these which are not styled, because we are going to reference them with their parent elements, like I explained to us in our last class. So with this, we now know our selectors. So I'm going to start with the very first one. Sometimes you start from the top. The very first one, which is the footer, that first container. So being a class element, I will simply say dot footer, and then declare my block, my CSS declaration block. Then I'll start calling my properties. So the first one is the whole of that section. I want its background color to be different. So, and I'm using hexadecimal. I believe I've used more of this because I know that we are familiar with calling color by their names. So let's quickly see the outcome of what we just did now, so you can see it. So that is why it's important you understand your structure. So you can see the way it segmented the whole of that area as the main container that contains all the footer elements. So remember the advice I gave to us some time ago that when you are styling as a learner like this, you don't write all your properties before you preview, because that will not allow you to know the role of each of this property. Sometimes you might just have a name of, you might just know the name of a property without knowing its function. So as a developer, there are things you can actually learn on your own. Let's say you come across a CSS property name and you put it here, and then you check the front end. Then when you see the transformation, you will know what the function of that property is. So that's what I advise as you are entering them one by one, except those ones you are already sure that this is what they are going to produce. So the write-up, because when you are styling, there are factors that determine whether you are to keep styling or you are to stop. I've said it before, that there is no one that will say that his own styling is the best. It can only be the best to you. Another person might say that it's not good. So, but at least on the average, you should get to a point where even you yourself, you are a bit okay, that, okay, this is presentable. Now, if you look at this container that we just assigned background color, something like black, but not complete black, you will notice that the write-ups are not visible. All the text inside this box, they are not visible. That is why I want to bring in what? Color. I want to bring in color. As you are assigning your color, you have to blend them. That is what we call color combination. So you can see what is happening here. The color that I just called now did not affect the link. Did not affect the link. Now, if you go and check now, you will see that that happened because those link, they are, if you look at the structure, because sometimes it's your structure, these are the tests that are affected, but that test color did not affect anything in your UL because one, these are directly, they are directly inside what? The first container to this. So it depends on how your CSS is able to what? To model the element. These ones are wrapped in a different folder, in a different container rather. So that is why you have to keep viewing the front end to know which one and which one is affected or not. Now, we want to add some padding space. Let's check and know there is need for padding space. We all know what is called padding. That is what the space on the inside, the content between the content and the border lines around it or the boundaries. So let's apply some border. All of this is for us to get a user-friendly environment. So the border line, I'll say 50 PS, and then I'll say 0, which means that there is a particular side that you are not concerned with its border, with its padding rather. So you can see what happened. You lap here 0, but there is what? You left this space as your padding. Then if you go down, you also see it here, but here 0, here 0. So this is the 50 and this is the 50. Now, all these are subjected to changes, like I've said before. If, for example, you are not comfortable with the 50, you can try another figure when you are doing your own, provided it's giving you the best presentation. Okay, so this is just a template that I'm using just to explain all this. They can change. So I'm done with that aspect for now. If there's any need, I'll come back later. So I will now style the second container because I've already identified them, which is class dot what? Is footer dot container. So just to reference it, this is the container you are styling now. You must always know your structure so that when you are communicating in CSS, You know what you are actually communicating to. So this container is the one that holds, if you look at the structure here, is the one that holds all the footer section. So we need to understand it that way. So how do we want, what do we want? We want maximum width. We don't want it to exceed certain width. Maximum width, 120 or 1002 PS. Maximum width. So let's check the front end and see what we have. So we have set maximum width for it. Now, most of this is probably because you are targeting the other devices. And at the same time, you know that that particular element is in a div, and you don't want it to take 100%. So that is why you put that, you set it maximum width. For example, if you want to see the width, let's see what happens. Let's just say border. I don't need border, but I just want to use it to know the boundary, the length of that maximum width. So I could just say 1 PS just to use it to preview a solid as usual. Then I'll just say, let me just say red. So if I come back here, you can see it. So you can see, so with this, you will now know when you say maximum width. So before this div, you know, every div, being it a block element, cover the entire width of the page by default. So that is why we have to reconfigure it, that you, being a child of the footer container, you shouldn't use the whole space. Leave this space. So that is why we set the maximum width to that 1200. So I just activated that borderline for me to differentiate the width of that container from the main container. Now, I don't need it. I only use it to access something. So I will just comment it out for now. So the next thing I'm going to do is I want some margin. Margin. Then I will say 0 and auto. Now remember, you are saying that one side should not have margin at all, while the other side should be calculated automatically by the browser. So it now depends on which device is coming on. So if you click here, you will see the margin now. So this is the auto calculation. And you can see that we have a better presentation. We have allowance. So you can see the other time when we left 50 here, the plan is that by the time we have this margin, the space will be what? Almost the same thing. Because most time, the what we call inheritance or inherent, whereby you are leaving the browser to inherit the last margin. So what happened here is inheriting the 50 or the 30 that we use here, since we said auto. So the browser have the privilege of inheriting anyone. So it's just like reading your mind that, okay, since he used this, this is what probably he might still want for this side. So you can see that gradually our footer is, is looking more presentable, right? So margin auto, then we still want to display it in a unique way. Display a flex. And then I believe I've explained this concept, but I have to explain again because of Mr. Austin. So we have this display property. Display property are actually used to determine how your content is placed in relation to its principal element. Remember that what we are talking to now is a child element to this. So now, whenever you want to determine the way this should be positioned, you need to also capture the effect of the main container where that very one is, knowing fully well that the privilege of this one movement is still tied to this. There are certain ways this one wants to move, but if this one does not permit it, it will not move. Now, what are we trying to achieve here? Let me just comment it out so that you know what we are trying to achieve. Because we need to understand the concepts even outside this particular class. The concept of that display flex or display inline block or display what? Block. These are properties that are used to position elements in a container. I said in a container. So I cannot just create H2 and say display flex. The criteria for displaying flex, at least let me use my annotation. I know if you watch one of those videos, you will see where I also illustrated it. Now, this is like container that we are talking about, so that you know at what point I should always consider display flex or display inline block or display block. You will always see code having this. Now, this is a container. Inside this container, you have things running across, just like I'll tell you what this represents now. This is exactly what you have here now. That footer div is this one, is this line. So this is just that footer. This is just that footer div that you class footer. Now, inside it, you now have that one we are talking to, which is a footer.container, which is holding everything here. So both this about us and all this, the UL, which is the one listing our links, all of them, they are inside this particular what? Link container. Now, and they are all taking full length, full width, because they are block elements. What do I mean? This is H1. This is a H1. I'm very sure. Let me go back to the script. If I come back here now, let me check. This is the H2. Now, for example, if I go to if I just do inline here so that you know what I'm saying. If I just say style, let me just do inline styling here and say what? A border, so that you know that it's taking the entire width also. If I say border 1 PS and I say solid as my border color, and then I say, let's say a yellow. So let's go to the front end. You will agree with me that, can you see it now? So you can see that what the H2 is a block element. Block elements are the one that takes the entire width by default. So you have to be the one to say, okay, since by default you are displaying 100%, because this is the meaning of what? 100%, taking the entire width. So what we are trying to explain here now is that this one is taking 100%. And remember that this down to this is a section that is inside the dots footer container that we are styling. Quick links. And this is another section that is also inside the footer container. Follow us is another section. Now, what we want to do now is that we want to place them like this. So they are all displaying block now. So we want to switch them to inline, which means that what? The whole of this section, quick link, should continue on the same row with what? This about us. The follow us should also be on the same row. And when that happens, this is what you get. It will change from this because right now they are all taking the full each row. Each of them, they are in each row. But now you want to change it to something like this. This first section we display somewhere here. The next section we display here. And then the last section we display here. So which means that what? All of them, they are in one line, in one row. As against how many rows you have before? 1, 2, 3, 4. You have collapsed everything to what? One row. And as a result of that, they are now placed side by side. That is how we want the footer. That is how we want the footer. So that is exactly the reason why we assign that particular part, which was display flex. So display flex in this case, we convert them to inline, from block to inline. So let me reactivate it and go back now. So once I come here, you can see what I'm talking about. You can see it now. So each of them, the whole of this section is now taking its own column. Another one taking its own column. And this one also what? Taking its own column. All of them, they are now in one row. That's the idea. So whenever you create a div and add, let's say, 3 different images, automatically just talk to that div, display flex. All the 3 images will be placed side by side instead of each of them taking each row. I've explained that before. I believe that is clear. Can I get a response there, please, if it's clear to you before I proceed? The concept of this display flex, is it clear now?
It's clear to me.
Okay.
Yeah, it's clear.
Okay, all right. Now, the next thing I want to do here is I want to, because I'm considering smaller devices like phones, whatever you are doing here, there are some things that will not really play a major role when you are viewing the website on a laptop. But definitely, when people start viewing it with mobile, you will start seeing some differences. So there is a property called flex wrap, and the value I am giving is wrap. Now, let's go back to I told us, now can anybody tell me what happened here now? Immediately I assigned that word flex wrap from the way it was displayed before.
It's about going back to it's going back to what it used to be before.
Okay, now what that did is to don't go outside your boundaries. Are you following? You know, we are
Okay.
still going to talk to
Yes,
those
sir.
section. We have not spoken to the
Mm.
section. So the section, we will define its own width. Because right now, why these two came down? Because what? They are currently having 100%. So the moment you try to curtail them to their container, they have now this flex wrap, you say that what? You shouldn't go. It's just like you are compressing it, no matter how big is it, it should be forced to compress itself. And that is why
Okay.
this one now find out there's no space again for me to. That's why I have to go back to the way it was. But by the
Okay,
time we start,
push it
yes,
down.
yes, by the time we start talking to only that section now, which is where we use a class name like this. By the time I start talking to this now, eh, the behavior of those things will change. Because right now,
Okay.
this is what we are
Okay.
talking to. So they have not
Yes.
received their
Yes.
styling. Now, going back now, I will now say justify contents. I told them also in one of the video, there are some properties you don't use anyhow. Any code you are given and you see justify content, justify item, align item, it means that you are talking to a container, not an individual element. And it's true. Look at our selector. It's a container we are talking to, not the content inside it. So you are saying that those things inside that container should be justified. That is what you now want them to, one person right now, one person is taking too much space. So you are trying to balance that everybody should be equal. You are trying to, justify content. Now, we want space in between. The moment I type that justify content, these are the options. The one I want is what space in between. So if I come back here now, did you see what happened?
Yes.
So I've justified it now. Once I reduce the width of this section now, this one will come here, this one will be here, and then the other will be there. And everything what? The space between the 3 of them will be equal. That is the meaning. So that one will not have too much space over the other. So that is what that justify content is doing. Now, quickly.
Okay. Which means that the container of about us, you have not adjusted the size. It's still 100%.
Yes, good. That's the reason why you are seeing that it's spreading this space like this now.
Yes,
Now we
it's
are
pushing
talking,
other ones away.
yes. So now let's quickly talk to that container now, which is dot footer what section, so that some of these things can start falling in place. So now I will always take all back to HTML structure, which should be a culture, because it's very important. If not, all these things will be confusing. So this is where we are now. So now, what do I want here also? Here, I want to calculate the width. I told you before that the current width is what? 100%. That is why they are not fitting. So the first thing I'm going to do is to define the width of that container. So that width now, I will calculate it. I told you that you can use a function like this, calculation. And then you can say 33%, 3.33%. Then on one side, then hyphen 20 PS. That is what you are trying to, distribute it. Now, okay, so now this particular width, we will now create a margin. Let's just create a margin. If that doesn't give us what we want, we can go back to our traditional way of widthing. So let's put a margin of 10 PS. Margin of 10 PS. Okay. Now, the width of this now, let's see if this is still too much. But normally, if it comes on phone, everything will be okay, because most of these things sometimes you don't consider laptop view. Let's check if we have some responsiveness here. So you can see on this, it's still having this view. It's not responsive yet, because once it's responsive on a mobile view, this one will come down, this one will come down. So let's go back. Now, my width here, let's say I put it 300 PS. I don't want to use percentage. Then you see, perfect. Perfect. So you can see, you check, you can see that that's justified content. You can see that it has helped us to what? To create equal space, as in reasonable space between them, justify them. Now, if I have 4 of them, who can tell us what I should do? I will reduce this width so that 4 of them can what? Enter. If I have 4 sessions, so I cannot stay on 300 width. If I have 5 sessions, so the more session you have, the more you what? You reduce the width so that all of them can be on the same line. So I'll stick to this side of that calculation. Now, we want to also talk to the dot. I believe once I call the class name, you will know the element we are talking to. I believe you know the one I'm talking to now. Now we are talking to all the what? The headings. All the heading we created with the H2. They are the ones we are talking to now. I go back there. So what do I want here? They are the, what I want to stop there is, okay, just to put font size, just to make them stand out, 18 PS. So margin bottom, I want some margin at the bottom before the other content. That margin should be 10 PS. Margin bottom, you can see it now. You just reduce what we are having there before was more than 10. So you reduce it so that it can be closer to the content they are describing. So the next section, the next thing I want to talk to is this. This is where we are now, is this section, which is also inside this. Now you know why we are referencing it this way. Footer section, then I will just say UL. That is why I did not class those elements. So what do I want there? Let's check how they are displaying first. I will know what we want to disappear. You see all these dots, they are the LI. We don't need them. So that's where we are now. We want to stop them. If not, the whole place will not be that neat. So the first thing, like I taught us before, when we are on HTML list, other list, where I told us where you can style the markers. So you can just select this and say what? None. We don't need them. So if I go back to the front end, you will see that what? They have all gone. And your footer is neat. I think there is a tag that we did not close here. That is why we are seeing the tag. We are not supposed to be seeing the tag. Let's quickly go to our HTML structure and go and rectify it. I think that should be from the second here. What is here? I thought we are okay. I think it should be SS. It should be SS. I think I copied it SS, so it's also reflecting here. So let me go back there. Okay, so everything is good now. Now the next thing I want here is I want some padding. I don't want padding. I want to turn them to 0. So I will say 0. Check and see what the pad is. So you can see it now. The padding what? There was, there was a kind of little space here that was making this not to align with this. So as you remove that padding now, it align it and everything is now in a block form. We don't also, in case there is a margin, also what? Delete it. Because sometimes you might be thinking that because you did not call margin, you think that the program or the browser will not assign margin. If you did not say margin 0, the browser has its own margin space already built with it. So once you have an element and you don't want any of this, you call them and assign 0 so that the browser will know that it will not use its own inbuilt what? Margin or property. So that is what we are doing here now. We are stopping the browser from applying its own. So we have removed the margin. Now, the next thing we want to style is the LI, because this is the container that contains the list. So we will just say dot footer hyphen section, then LI inside it. So what we want there is just to say margin bottom 10 PS. We just want some margin there. 10 PS. So if I come back here, you see it now. There's a little space and everything look more organized. Now, that is only what I want there. If you want more, you can always try on your own. So the next one is footer section. Footer section, we are talking to, from the selector, you will know. Can somebody unmute and tell me which one are we talking to now? Let me know whether you are getting, you can use selector to know which element.
I think it's the link.
Good. The link, if you look at your code structure, you will see that what? After LI, there is what? Link inside
Link.
what? So they are the one you are talking to now. Now we want to enhance their color. Their color to be this. Then another thing is text decoration. Text decoration is this. Look up. When you create link by default, they comes with this underline, right? By default, underline and that color. So now we have stopped the color to white. And now this underline, we want to stop it. That is what decoration is. So you now say what? None. That is, you don't want it. So once you go back, you see that what those underline has disappeared. Now, the next thing we want to talk to is the buttons. I believe there are some buttons in our footer as well. Let's check yes, we have button. Is there no button? Let me check very well. I thought we have it. Okay, let me see.
No button.
Okay, so check. Okay, so we don't have button because we use anchor tag. We use anchor tag. So except if you want them to look better, then we can, this is where we will now communicate to them. So you can just also say here, maybe some padding, maybe padding 12 PS by 10 PS. If you want to put, but we don't need that. We don't need background color, let's say black. So I'm going to, I don't need this actually. I just want to see, except you want them to, so even there are buttons, so we don't need that. That does not make our work look nice. So let's quickly look at the responsiveness. That is the last part of it, how we can make this footer to be responsive. So let's inspect again quickly. Let's see whether it's responsive. So you can see that on this device, let me check on iPhone Pro. So it's responsive on this, but definitely, like I said, don't assume that it will be responsive across all browsers. So still go ahead with assigning your responsiveness. So let's quickly do that. Responsiveness. So adding. So here we are using media query concept. Remember, you say at media. This is the CSS function that is used to implement responsiveness. As media, then you specify the device range by saying inside the function maximum width. Maximum width, and then let's say 7678 PS. Now you declare your CSS block, and then you call the element inside it. The element is going to implement the responsiveness on inside the function. So which is the section. We are not concerned with the main container. The main container should definitely will move better. But the section, we call the section are the part that will be breaking, as this is what I'm saying for proper understanding. Let me use manual method to implement it. Now, if we start moving from here now, if I start moving from here, you can see that is the section that will be breaking. You can see that will be breaking. So you can see the way they are breaking on a mobile view. But the responsiveness is already there based on this browser. Like I said, don't assume that it will also go well with other devices. That is why we are manually assigning. So across all devices, the browser that doesn't have most of this by default, it will not implement whatever we must approve program. So is the section of the section of that, the div with the class name footer.section that we are talking about, that we want to implement the responsiveness. So what will be the width at this width at this on a device within this range? What should be the width of it is what we are capturing here, which is what the browser will obey at the end of the day. That is, we are saying that when you are on a device whose maximum width or whose width is within this, then you should display different width. And that width is what you want to now put here. So you can say width, calculate half of the width you have there, which is what? 50%. 50%. And then, of course, on the other side, you can just say 20 PS. So if this calculation method do not work for you, then we can always go back to our traditional way. So you can see once you can see everything is, let's check different devices. Let's check different devices. Let's check for this now. You can see irrespective of the device I'm picking, you can see on this device, this is how, because it's not within that particular 768 that you specify. Now you can see on this device, you are able to see 3 of them because it's bigger than phone. So these are different devices. If you check here, everything is responsive. Everything is responsive. So on that is all for that. Then there's another device. We want to set another responsiveness for another device with different width. Because the way it works is that you need to look at the average width of all the devices in the world, the one that are in between. Somebody is not using Android phone, somebody is using tablet. Then, of course, by default, the laptop is already having its own responsiveness by just having this code. In case you don't know, this is what is defining laptop view responsiveness, this particular line of your code. So that is why we don't need to implement laptop responsiveness, because once we activate our HTML code default structure, it brings out this meta word tag inside your head, which determine how the website will be responsive on a laptop. So the laptop should not be your focus. Your focus should be on smaller devices. So now what we want to do here now, we don't want to assume that the responsiveness should be implemented only on a device whose width is within this range. We want to also create another backup. In case it's smaller than that, it should also be responsive. So that is what I want to do here now. By starting again with what? At media, because it's another responsiveness that I'm about to what? To define. This one, I will say maximum width. Maximum width should be less than that one, which is 480 PS. 480 PS. And then I will declare, then call which of the element, that same element, you are creating different devices responsiveness. When it comes on this, display where. When it comes on that, also what? Display, because anyone outside it, it will then mean that we have created what? 3 devices, what? Responsiveness, the laptop, which is the default, and then this. So now what we are going to do is we will just call that dot what? Footer section, and then declare its width. So on this very device, it should display 100%. That is the mobile, very small device. Display 100%, which means that what? On that device, each of these sections should display the whole of that width, 100%. You take 100% in your own row, another one 100% in its own row, another one 100% in its own row. That is the meaning. Now let's come here. So this should be within the range. You can see this is a 344 by this. So let's see if we have an equivalent. This is 768, which is the one we have already programmed. So this is responsiveness. Let's check this. So it's actually working perfectly. It's working perfectly. So that is the idea of this. You have created another responsiveness for another device. So that is all about our footer design. So what we are going to do now is to copy the whole of this footer that we just updated here, because like I told us, we should have okay, I think we have it here. No, but we don't have the code structure. We ought to have completed the footer before we go for shop, but because in our shop page we don't have this footer, but since the CSS is there, so see what I'm going to do to save my time. You don't have to start designing the footer there because the CSS is there. So just take the whole of this. Take the whole of this, copy it, just the HTML structure. Go to your shop page. After the last closing tag, paste it there. So which means that if I go to my shop page now, my footer is also there now. You can see it. So if you have done footer and header before copying it to create that shop, any page you are developing have header and they has what? Footer as constant element. So you will just be changing the body. So if I come here now, you can see that what? The same header, the same footer, but different what? Body. So your assignment is to make sure that your about us page should have that and everything should work perfectly.